Tonight I ordered a targeted military strike on the airfield in Syria from where the chemical attack was launched. It is in this vital national security interest of the United States to prevent and deter the spread and use of deadly chemical weapons. There can be no dispute that Syria used banned chemical weapons, violated its obligations under the Chemical Weapons Convention, and ignored the urging of the UN Security Council.
President Trump pulled the trigger on an attack against Syria. Last night, the U.S. military launched multiple cruise missile strikes against the Syrian air base, where President Assad launched the chemical attack earlier this week.
One high-ranking administration official told me immediately following the attack, quote, "There's a new sheriff in town." President Trump sending a message to friends and foes alike.
In just a few moments, we'll talk to member of the Foreign Relations Committee, Senator Marco Rubio. But first, here on set, the chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee, Republican Senator John McCain of Arizona. Also with us, David Ignatius, Katty Kay, and John Heilman.
So,
Very good to have
Senator
you.
Senator McCain, it's especially great to have you here this morning because we have been complaining over the past week, past several days especially, that all we've heard for 6 years is Syria's too tough. We can't do anything. A lot of wringing of hands while 5 million people scattered, 500,000 killed, 2 chemical attacks. You actually have been warning about this outcome for the past 4 to 5 years. So you tell us, was last night an appropriate attack? Did we do enough?
I think it was appropriate, but I would like to say, despite all the enthusiasm we see this morning, if I might quote Churchill, it's the end of the beginning, not the beginning of the end. We've got a Middle East that is in chaos, the Europeans being destabilized, the spread of ISIS throughout the world, and this is the challenge of Bashar Assad, and then we've also got the challenge of ISIS. So there's a lot more to go. But the signal, I think, that was sent last night, just as you said, was a very, very important one.
Was it important not only to Russia and Assad, but also to China and North Korea?
And our friends. As has been discussed earlier on the show, in fact, David mentioned it, a lot of the Arab countries are willing to be partners with us as long as they think they can rely on us. And if we're really going to stabilize that region, it's going to take Arab participation, who are scared to death about the continued successes of Iran. This is, David will tell you, this is 1,000-year-old rivalry between Persians and Arabs. And it's just another manifestation of it.
And David, what we heard from the Sunni Arabs over and over again over the past 5, 6 years, 7 years, is they didn't feel like the United States had their back. Does last night change that in a sense?
It begins to. These are people who have a deep sense of insecurity, anxiety, anger toward Iran. They feel that Iran has been pushing them around. They want to see more. The question I'd have for Senator McCain is, what's the right measured next step? The President began something last night. What's the right next place to go?
By the way, could I also comment before I say that? This is a team that the President has assembled, that I have praised. The question was that a lot of us had. Get that, David.
David's phone's ringing.
I apologize. I told the White House not to call.
It's the White House.
Yeah. I think the question was, would the President listen to this team?
Right.
Arguably the strongest team that I have seen in the White House.
The strongest foreign policy team you've seen.
The national security team. Yeah. And obviously he did. Obviously, he listened to that team, and that's what's most encouraging to me, is that he respects Mattis, he respects McMaster, he respects Kelly. He is so I think that's very important. I think the next step, David, is to see what the reaction is, and then be prepared to take other action. You know, it's not just chemical weapons, but it's barrel bombs. It's other atrocities that are committed. Of those 400 and some thousand have been killed, a small number of those are by chemical weapons. The rest of it is gross violations of international law. And by the way, I would move forward with the safe zones. I would move forward with the arming and training of the Free Syrian Army, which you'd have to rebuild from a very low level. But I would go ahead and move forward with those plans. And by the way, you've got to settle the problem with Turkey.
Right.
As you know, about the Kurds.
We've been talking about the president now kind of surrounded by a new dynamic, a new team in the foxhole now with his national security team, which most people think, as you do, is one of the strongest we've seen in years.
I've never seen better people.
I know, me too. I ask, though, how important it is with the world watching now, with almost sort of a psychological reset happening as the country watches this unfold. How important is it that this president is methodical moving forward? No tweeting, no blurting, no lurching, no seriously.
I would love to see the tweeting stop, but I'd also like to see pigs fly. But I doubt if it's going to be, I just think it's in his DNA, but perhaps there could be more restraint.
Right.
I would hope that would happen. He now has an opportunity to reboot with the American people, at least as far as national security is concerned. Well, I've heard you all discuss the polling numbers he has. I think he's going to see that the American people probably approve of this. What American didn't see the pictures of those dead babies? I mean, you know,
and again,
this is an
the important thing to point out too is it's not a positive reaction to a military strike. It's that most of the people that have seen this and understand what happened understand that this was the most measured response that he could have. And Caddy, he has left now with several very good, I mean, he laid one card down. He's got 5 more military bases, 5 more airfields to strike if Assad steps out of line again.
Yeah, and the question is, how many of his cards does he choose to play on the table, right? Or was this a one-off? Was this a reaction to showing that he was somebody who stood by his words when he said lines had been crossed, and that it ends with there? Senator, you've got quite a long list of things that you'd like to see. You'd like to see the safe zones. You'd like to see the Air Force grounded. You want a new comprehensive strategy. You want coordination with American allies. I agree with you. There's a lot of enthusiasm this morning, but we should also be asking questions and have some skepticism. Where does this lead to now? Because if it stops here and you don't get the list of things that you've laid out quite clearly, how meaningful is this in terms of what's happening actually in Syria and to Syrian civilians?
As I mentioned, this is a beginning, and then a lot of hard things have to be done. But without this, those other things couldn't have been done either. So. Again, I've had conversations with McMaster and Madison at length, and they realize that this is a long, hard slog. After all, it's been 8 years in the making, and to think we're going to reverse that in a matter of days or weeks or even months. But the signal that is being sent, as you all have been discussing, the signal is important, but the hard work still lies ahead of us.
Do you think it will happen?
I do because I think that's what the thinking of the smartest people I know is as well. And a lot of it's not going to be very easy. But I think you're going to have more enthusiastic partners in this effort than we had the skepticism that existed before. But let's all face the fact. When the president drew the red line, didn't act, we all know what the results were. Now, the president basically has reversed that that action and restored credibility. And coincidences are nice. I'm glad he's talking to the Chinese president at the same time.
It doesn't hurt.
That's not something that was lost on the administration. I talked to top administration officials last night after the news broke and asked if they were concerned that the Chinese leader was there, and to a person they all said, concerned? We're glad he's here because we're going to be talking about North Korea next. And at least in their conversations with me last night, said they were going to make it very clear to the Chinese leaders that they were not going to stand by and allow North Korea to get nuclear capability to strike Seattle, Portland, San Francisco, and Los
The most
Angeles.
immediate crisis we have is not in the Middle East. The most immediate crisis right now is this crazy fat kid, and I know we were in, who is honest.
You're allowed to call him crazy.
He is not rational. Everything I read about him,
Right.
he's not rational. What's the worst kind of adversary would be an irrational person with a nuclear weapon. So I would hope that the meetings with the Chinese leader, who is now going through the process of consolidating his position, would be that he would take sufficient action against North Korea to stop us. They can do it.
You know, a little known fact about Mika and her family is one
What?
time Mika's family left her with the Santa Claus ringing a bell in Midtown.
Times Square.
In Times Square, back when she was 5 years old. Good job, Brzezinski's.
Why are you-
Out of sight, out of mind. Well, we've done the same thing with John Heilman. We
Okay.
forgot we had
This
John
is very
Heilman.
strange.
We
By the
left
way.
him behind there,
It's
but
really
there he
random.
is. We found him, John Heilman. It was just a good chance to tell his story. So John Heilman here. John, you have a question for Senator McCain.
I do, of course. Senator McCain, you just made a comment about how strong the team around President Trump is on national security and foreign policy. Until a couple days ago, Steve Bannon was sitting at the table with the National Security Council. He's no longer doing that. Do you think, well, do you have a comment on that, whether you think that's a positive development, a negative development, or neutral?
I think it's positive because no political person has ever been on the National Security Council. And by the way, I've always said that he had a very strong team around him, but I've also said during this period of time, will the president listen to them? I think that question was answered last night.
But moving forward, that team is going to have to find a way to help him communicate effectively day after day after day, because as you said, this is the beginning of a long, convoluted process.
And part of that process, obviously, the more complicated part of that process, as David Ignatius has been talking about this morning, has to do with what's going to be going on in eastern Syria.
Exactly.
More complicated, but as David has reported this morning, and maybe you can help us out here, there is going to be a tightening of the grip on ISIS.
Yes, and I believe you'll see them take Mosul and you'll see them take Raqqa. But there's a huge problem looming out there, and that is Erdogan, who does not want the Kurds taking Raqqa. And we are dependent on the Turks for a whole lot of things, including the air base at Incirlik. So that contradiction has not been resolved
So
yet.
how do we resolve that?
I think you have to
Let's face it, with Erdogan, who has been anything but a good ally to this country over the
Look,
past
here's the
8 years.
dilemma. The faster we take Raqqa, the quicker we're going to cut off this stream of terrorists that are coming out of Raqqa. At the same time, if you use the Kurds, then you have a contradiction and a really big problem with the Turks, i.e. Erdogan, who believes that the Kurds are a greater enemy than ISIS is. And there's got to be some intense negotiations. What's the answer? I think you could use the Kurds up to the outskirts of Raqqa, but I don't think I would want them to come in. And I'm a great supporter of the Kurds.
Right.
Caddy. Oh,
David.
So I just wanted to ask you about what many see as the wild card in this confrontation, and that's Iran. The U.S. has 5,000 or more troops who are vulnerable in Iraq, over 1,000 probably now in Syria. The Iranians have shown their ability to strike with very advanced munitions that cause real harm to our troops. What should we be doing to deter Iran from any attack like that?
David, obviously, the answer is to tell them that the price that they would pay for attacking Americans would be higher than anything they might benefit from it. But the Iranians aren't going to go quietly into the night. They are now in a superior position in Iraq, as well as Syria, as well as they want to have that Shia crescent that we have discussed in the past, and they have been close to achieving it. So I think that one of the worst things that I've seen in my lifetime was to see American sailors on their knees with their hands clasped behind their necks. We can't let that kind of thing go unanswered.
Kenny.
Rex Tillerson goes to Moscow and meets Putin. What would you like his message to Putin to be when it comes to Syria and when it comes to the future of Assad?
I think we have to, first of all, it is unacceptable for anyone who uses chemical weapons in gross violation of any national norm. It is not acceptable for them to be supported by Vladimir Putin. And we expect them, once we probably have to do some more things, to force the Syrians to the table and say, look, and it may end up in a partition, but at least it's got to stop. Look, this is one of the horrendous events in history. 6 million refugees. We've talked about it all the time. The destabilization of Europe, the needless deaths of over 400,000 people. We've sat by and watched it, and we become numb until you see those pictures of those dead babies.
Is Putin there, do you think, on Assad? Do you think Putin is getting there? Because we asked him over the barrel bombs, and he didn't stop the barrel bombs.
I think that when we didn't stop the barrel bomb was because we didn't act. I think that one thing that Vladimir Putin understands, and that's power. Yeah, he's an old KGB agent, and he's hell-bent on restoring the Russian Empire.
Right.
Now we've got to talk about Ukraine, get some defensive weapons to Ukraine.
Yeah, I just wonder, though, what page they are on, the Russians, compared to this president and our administration, because the Russians are even kind of painting this strike as not very effective. Is that
Which is not wise.
We're back to the days of the Soviet Union. We really are. We're back to those golden days of yesteryear where the spokesman says the most outrageous things, and
well,
it's just
look
them.
at us lately. But having said that, it's not wise, perhaps, to try and create fake news out of this attack and say that might we strike again just to prove a point? And do you expect this president to change his verbiage on Vladimir Putin?
I hope so.
Yeah.
And I think that he is beginning to obviously have a significant shift there. But peace through strength. We've got to rebuild the military. Our military is in terrible shape. We've got to do a better job there. But I also believe that Vladimir Putin, even though he's the old KGB colonel, he's also a pragmatist. Mm-hmm. He understands power. He understands how far he can go. He understands those boundaries. So it's a whole other program about the propaganda effort as well as cyber. Cyber is the new battlefield of the future, and so far we're not winning.
Yeah, we're in it.
Let's talk about Gorsuch, the nuclear option, the filibuster. George Will came on earlier this morning, and it made a lot of sense to me. He said, if you want to stop the filibuster or slow it down, make them stand on the floor and make everything in the Senate stop until the filibuster stops.
And I understand that's the way it was when you first came to the Congress back during the Coolidge administration.
It was. I was swept in with Silent Cal at 24.
Back in the Cold War.
Here we go.
Listen,
24 was a big year for people like me.
Yesterday was a dark day in the history of the United States Senate. We abandoned the process that then allows the majority to basically rule. And the result will be, when the Republicans are in charge, you'll see more conservative Supreme Court justices. When the Democrats are in charge, you'll see more liberal Supreme Court justices, because they don't have to rely on the 60 votes. They don't have to
So why don't we go back to how it was pre-1970 and make people, if they want to filibuster, make them stand on the floor?
I am all for that. But the action taken yesterday now brings on the tyranny of the majority, which was why we are bicameral. Right. Yesterday, Benjamin Franklin was spinning in his grave.
Okay, Senator John McCain, a great honor to have you here. Thank you so much
for having
coming
me.
in.
You're doing a terrible job.
Thank you so much. Well, we strive to do a worse job every day, and I think we are succeeding
He's
here.
evolved a little bit, hasn't he,
Stay
over
with
time?
us. We have just been talking to Senator Cheerful John McCain. Coming up next, Senator Marco Rubio on yesterday's attacks.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.